Hello and welcome, and yes, day 100. 365 days towards racial change, almost a third of the way home. Let's do it. 100 days, wow. Okay, we're here talking about black issues in America. We want to use stories, facts, history, economics, a lot of things to see the black position in America. Are blacks progressing, regressing, stagnant? Um, we can consult charts and graphs, although there's not much visual stuff. This here behind me in that little 100's about the most I've seen, besides the books I'll tell you about in a minute. So very low tech. Maybe next year we'll recycle this and we'll put some bells and whistles into the program. But that's the main crux here. I gotta admit, I've cooled a little bit in my zeal since I've started this project. Only because, there's a lot of reasons why I am where I am, being a black man in America, and we can cast blame and innuendo on all sides of the equations. There's even more than two sides of the equations. It's multi-dimensional here. But having said that, two thoughts emerge, as I go on. Who knows what the next 100 days will bring me as far as my focus and what I'm scratching at. I'm finally able to articulate it. I thought I was going crazy because I felt I wasn't progressing on one hand. I felt I couldn't progress on another hand. I felt I was meeting resistance to progression on another hand. I think you got to be black to understand some of those facets in America. They're very real, and it's pretty sad. Black folks bear the majority of America's dysfunction. We are a minority in America, yet the majority of us are poor and struggling and whatnot, and find it hard, as we kind of hunker down, wait around for white power, entitlement, and expectation of privilege to allow us to participate. Trust me, it feels like, and I think it's real, that as they do allow us to participate, using those terms, they simply raise the bar. So, it's like minimum wage. Oh boy, we raised the minimum wage. But you got prices shooting up all over the place. It's an economic anomaly phenomenon that's actually necessary because of the way the finances are structured in America and in the world. But two thoughts emerge. First thought has two parts. First part is does the black mind, is the slave mind for black Americans being perpetuated, passed on from generation to generation? And the second part, it's probably obvious, does the white mind, entitlement, privilege, expectation of favor get passed down from generation to generation? For the black consciousness, I think in general, blacks are navigating a whole lot of more obstacles to success, especially mentally, in America. White people in general navigate much less and are even that much more articulate in some other areas, which segues into my second thought, is my burden for financial literacy. I'm finding that financial literacy is important towards economic change, stability, growth. I look at some of even um, our superstars, our highlights in the black community, the game show hosts, athletes, movie stars, and whatnot. You know, see, I don't know if they realize or understand. See, it looks like they're doing hard work when actually they're navigating business entities. They're using a financial language uh, that enables them to participate as such. I would say that they don't even like they get paid for those um, sound bites and commercials and all that and appearances, superstars on that athletic teams and whatnot. But that's just icing on the cake. That's gravy. There are, I would argue that they have corporations, they have entities that are serving them uh, exponentially. I wouldn't even say you never hear their salaries or figures. If you do, then that's actually a precarious position tax wise. You know, um, that athlete better be some kind of LLC, a corporation uh, configuration in America, or they're just they're going to run into a hard time. Hard time. I don't know. I'm not sure I can properly articulate financially what I'm trying to say. What you need, you read a man named Robert Kiyosaki. He illustrates those issues a lot more. Towards the end of the year, I'm sure we're going to dive into some of his work and philosophy. But primarily, what brings me to be motivated here 100 days, 100 straight days here at 365 days towards racial change is a man named Dr. Claude Anderson. Now, he's the guy that's very articulate with black issues, merging history, filling in a lot of gaps. There's a lot of gaps. See, in my education, the 13, 14 years I was held hostage and indoctrinated and conditioned to be a working employee, a better employee, and stuff like that. And all this success-based education in the classroom and all that. I didn't realize there were a lot of gaps in my historical understanding. You know, how does America uh, sustain itself to have an American Revolution? You know, um, where did the labor come from to really boost this nation? You know, well, we can go on and on. There's a whole lot of gaps in history, and the history is just so much fireworks. It's not filled in um, with you fill it in with American slavery. Find out what the black slaves were doing at any time in American history. Oh, say from 1500s on. Insert some blackness in there. Oh, and then things make sense. You find and exploited and oppressed people. Well, Dr. Claude Anderson really brings that out and shines and sheds a lot of light on some amazing things. I want you to get these books. First book, I read three. These were important. He sells these as a bundle. A Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask. Black Labor, White Wealth, Search for Power and Economic Justice. And Powernomics, his national plan to empower Black America. Then you'll understand, get a better idea of what's going on here at racial change. Also, we take a fictional look at slave life in America, Uncle Tom's Cabin, Harriet Beecher Stowe's mid-1800s. And her book actually informs a lot of stereotypes, caricatures, theater in America. So we go there, we check in on Old Tom and a lot of other slaves in the periphery of his life and slave masters as well. We look at the slave trade. She really brings out, she's got it's an evangelical message, abolitionist message, expose on slave life. You know, the further you go south, the worse conditions are for the slave. Let's see. Behind me, hashtag us too, or a response to the hashtag Me Too movement. Black women seem to have found it necessary to focus, and there's, the differences are black and white in a lot of instances, even among women, as we see. So please go there and see what the latest is on there. I don't go there often. Even though 100 days here, I'm not a big online guy. I like reading books in my hand. I don't like it on my device. Oh, go to Black Enough, BLAGGENUF, and you'll find kind of a black Facebook communities there. Let's see, you'll find Dr. Anderson. He's a real person. We actually met through a mutual friend of ours. He doesn't know me, though. I was just introduced to his work. Powernomics.com and the Heritage Institute in Washington, D.C. Oh, if you do get a hold of him, tell him Tomlin's Nyback says hello. Continuing on in our series, we've got two New Jerseyites, two men from the Garden State today. We're going through a series on the signers of the Declaration of Independence. Why did they sign? A little bit of background, religious affiliations, and stuff like that. This is not an in-depth expose. They're dead, so whatever I get, and it's mostly from Wikipedia. You can go do that. I'm interested. I was interested in the signers of the Declaration of Independence, because so little was done through history. So little is being done for the black folks all through history. Forget civil rights and social integration. Stick around here long enough, read Dr. Anderson's work, and you'll see why he believes that those two processes were failures on a lot of ways. That they were symbols, and they didn't glean tangible resources for black folks. And we were just robbed. We gave free labor and ourselves to the American institution. Native Americans gave up their land and a lot of their lives. But Native Americans get grants, land. They have autonomous areas in the country, and black folks deserve that and more. It's interesting. So maybe one day we'll get around to it. We'll see. All right, let's get into it. The two men from Garden State, New Jersey. Now, first guy, signer, was named John Hart, and his birth date and place is disputed, which is not surprising. Probably anything before the say mid 1700s, it's not surprising. You can't get a fix on some of these guys, individuals' lives, let alone slavery records. I understand presently I saw a blurb, I think, on History Channel. They're digitizing slave documents from Sierra Leone, Africa, which is good. That's good that they're doing that. Um, some of those parchments and papers have been preserved all these years. Good for them. Now, John Hart's father led New Jersey militia, and the militia was in response to the French and Indian War that happened a little bit before the American Revolution. You know, a lot of war and violence all over this land. It's never stopped, you know. Even though we go over there to fight wars, we murder and we still shoot each other and stuff over here. It's amazing. Uh, John Hart, he replaced the loyalists at the Continental Congress, First Continental Congress. A lot of loyalist influence, but the colonies wanted a different character, and they grew in their desire to have more patriots on the team, of course, because they're heading towards breaking away from England. So the Second Continental Congress, um, they say, you know, get some patriots up here, send some patriots to this thing, and let's be on agreement. Let's start agreeing and start pulling away from England's rule. Um, while in New Jersey and the occupation, British are coming and all that. Um, from the British looking for weapons, of course, tracking down these traitors and treasonous men. He actually fled um, his place of residence in New Jersey as the British were coming and they occupied Trenton. And we know the famous story George Washington goes on Christmas Eve. Watch out my history. But, you know, it's Christmas holidays. He catches them drunk and chilling out. Think that they're taking a holiday, and he's, you know, it was a great ploy. You see that actually in history. Um, some of these religious holidays we think are actually some of the most vulnerable days. I think Vietnam, the Tet Offensive. I think just recently there was some. Uh, well, you find religious gatherings, mosques, meaning that there's nothing sacred anymore, is what I'm saying. You know? And that's everybody does it to everybody, so we're not going to get too far into that. He was a Presbyterian, so the Presbyterian, the press boss, church government stuff, Protestant leanings and stuff. You know, I'm looking for, hoping that something would stand out in a person's religion or relationship with God. From the vein where you have a relationship with Jesus, and that has it tempers how I'm interacting here in the world, and like that. So I'm looking for that in their relationship to slavery and oppressing these people simply because of their skin color. You know, you'll hear me say it time and again, blacks. We're not a different kind of human being. We're not less than, better than. We're not some. We weren't transported from another planet. It's just, you know, evolution. God likes colors. I mean, think about it. It's a very colorful space. You know, from animals, people, flora. Um, Even the ocean has layers of color, sky and stuff. God loves to light it up. You know, however you understand this space, created or not, it is colorful. the visual senses. And the powers that be, in my view, wanted, color vanilla to blue black. Hey, go figure. So that's what I look for, and we've come across some, the Quakers are are the first to bring voice against the Quakers, or the first to be abolitionists. Um, in his life, he was a landowner, but since he was more northern, uh, much like John Hancock, he had maybe a few slaves around. No slaves mentioned in my research of John Hart, but he's a landowner. And um, didn't find any relationship with being a Presbyterian and his view on slavery. He just seemed to want to uh, conduct business and stuff and go on just living his life. But he understood that England um, was not being fair. This taxation without representation and all the stuff we know that we learned in school, it just impacted everyone in the colonies. It just made people mad. It was an irritant, and it was best to get away from that. Um, Died kind of a painful death. Kidney stones caught up with him. It says he was jammed up with him for 6 months. They wouldn't pass. Pretty large. I had a friend years ago. He had, I'll say, chronic kidney stones. When what I mean is that they just kept recurring. Some hardness, some calcification. I even have I had a stone. I don't know how much anatomy, but you have 4 salivary glands, 2 here, 2, I guess, in this area. I had one removed because I was consistently getting some calcification build up there, and when they removed it, it just wouldn't pass. One of them passed one time. Interesting deal with that, but the second one formed. I don't know if it's diet, where that comes from. But anyway, 6 months with kidney stones, that's got to be uncomfortable. I hear that's very uncomfortable to have. So that's how he died in 1779. John Hart. Next guy is Joseph Hewes, 1730, 1779 as well. 1779 was not a good year, huh? 49-ish, Now remember, 40s, you crossed 40s, you get 50 years old back then. That's old, man. Something powerful is working in your life. Joseph Hewes was a merchant in New Jersey, but his political career actually began in North Carolina. Now, he was actually a loyalist initially. He liked what the Crown was doing. Bit of a pacifist in the sense that, yeah, I can imagine just kind of going with the flow. The Quaker, there was uh, some discrepancy, because in one source I found him listed as Episcopal, but Wikipedia listed him as a Quaker. There were some in and outs with his relationship with the Quakers. But although not for independence initially, he changed his mind over time. Especially being a merchant, I find the merchants maybe at the end of this will tally merchants, landowners, lawyers, physicians. I would think that the merchants would readily cast off uh, any force or influence that's going to eat away at their bottom line. They're business people, you know. I I don't like spending money. You know, I'm cheap, good, yeah. You know, um, so these taxes, you know, anything that says I've got to put out more, I don't like that, and that's probably a general human condition. You know, um, want to conserve resources, have someone else pay for it. So this is the American way, anyway. So that these merchants, oh, you'll find them probably readily, you know, enthusiastically motivated to cast off anything that's going to eat away at their bottom line. The Quakers were pacifists anyway, um, so that may have been a conflict in his decision to not support independence, because independence is going to mean some bloodshed. It's going to mean some force eventually. Men and women, people are going to have to die eventually. Uh, I have here he eventually departed from the Quakers' thought, the pacifism, and knew that you just going to have to step up your game to uh, bring some change. Yeah, and it's interesting in history. Most of history, you're going to find bloodshed. There's going to be those who argue that the nonviolent, the pacifist direction has brought more. It's like Jesus, Gandhi, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., those things like that, being the martyr and whatnot. Uh, that's another argument, but his pacifist Quakerism kind of didn't hold up, and eventually that was a reason, I guess, for him moving on, maybe finding another church with the Episcopalians, um, and just being more proactive in securing his needs. He was wealthy enough. Uh, America didn't have its own navy, and that was just poorly equipped. So he purchased his own navy for the Revolutionary War, and he was even the commander of it, 1776. That was his navy. You know, that's pretty impressive. Uh, I don't have a few $1 billion laying around, but he was pretty well equipped and financially strong to do that. Oh, and he's kind of a hopeless romantic. His fiance died shortly before the wedding, and he never married. And after he died, his memoirs, journals, diaries were found, and he was a man with a heavy heart at not having his own significant other. You know what? I don't know what he did much with that pain. I'm sure the war kept him occupied for that for those later years. You know, maybe that's how he was able to focus and get a navy together and participate in the American Revolution. So there's our two men from the Garden State. Both died same year. Um, did what they could. Couldn't find much in their response to slavery or the black issues. But what I'm finding here, as we go through this series is that these white, powerful men just kind of had their priorities were to get free from what's going on in America, and then they would address all the internal problems facing the newly emerging nation here in the Western Hemisphere. We want to keep going. We got a couple more guys to go. I'm almost halfway there. See what other little tidbits and nuggets we can pull out as we try to put together the entire mind of these men as they signed the Declaration of Independence, and it swayed how their relationship to slavery and God was mixed in the whole picture. I'm Tom Lyns-Nyback. Thanks for hanging out with me. This is our 100th day. Let's keep it going. At 365 days towards racial change, I'll see you tomorrow.